We are going to look at Isaiah chapter 56, at least the first part of it, but as an introduction into that chapter, I'm going to read all of Isaiah 55. Many of the verses you'll recognize, they sound familiar, not that you've memorized them, but chapter 55 leads into chapter 56. Remember that the children of Israel, at least the land of Judah, the southern kingdom, was taken over by Babylon. And when Nebuchadnezzar came in and took over Judah, took the people, most of the people, into Babylon as captives. They left some of the poor people in the area. But before they took them all and left, they destroyed the temple. And we want to keep that in mind. There was no single place for people to go to worship. We know today we can worship God anywhere, and we'll talk about that as we go on today. But let's look at Isaiah 55. I'll just read it, and then we'll go on to chapter 56. Ho, everyone that thirsteth, come ye to the waters, and he that hath no money, come ye, buy and eat. Yea, come, buy wine and milk without money and without price. Wherefore do ye spend money for that which is not bread, and your labor for that which satisfieth not? Hearken diligently unto me, and eat ye that which is good, and let your soul delight itself in fatness. Incline your ear, and come unto me. Hear, and your soul shall live. And I will make an everlasting covenant with you, even the sure mercies of David. Behold, I have given him for a witness to the people, a leader and commander to the people. Behold, thou shalt call a nation that thou knowest not, and nations that knew not thee shall run unto thee, because of the Lord thy God, and for the Holy One of Israel, for he hath glorified thee. Seek ye the Lord while he may be found. Call ye upon him while he is near. Let the wicked forsake his way, and the unrighteous man his thoughts. And let him return unto the Lord, and he will have mercy upon him, and to our God, for he will abundantly pardon. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, saith the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. For as the rain cometh down and the snow from heaven, and returneth not thither, but watereth the earth, and maketh it bring forth and bud, that it may give seed to the sower and bread to the eater, so shall my word be that goeth forth out of my mouth. It shall not return unto me void, but it shall accomplish that which I please, and it shall prosper in the thing whereto I sent it. For ye shall go out with joy, and be led forth with peace. The mountains and the hills shall break forth before you into singing, and all the trees of the field shall clap their hands. Instead of the thorn shall come up the fir tree, and instead of the brier shall come up the myrtle tree. And it shall be to the Lord for a name, for an everlasting sign that shall not be cut off. Thus saith the Lord, keep ye judgment, and do justice, for my salvation is near to come, and my righteousness to be revealed. Blessed is the man that doeth this, and the Son of Man that layeth hold on it, that keepeth the Sabbath from polluting it, and keepeth his hand from doing any evil. Neither let the son of the stranger that hath joined himself to the Lord speak, saying, the Lord hath utterly separated me from his people. Neither let the eunuch say, behold, I am a dry tree. For thus saith the Lord unto the eunuchs that keep my Sabbaths, and choose the things that please me, and take hold of my covenant. Even unto them will I give in mine house, and within my walls, a place and a name better than of sons and of daughters. I will give them an everlasting name that shall not be cut off. Also the sons of the stranger that join themselves to the Lord, to serve him, and to love the name of the Lord, to be his servants. Every one that keepeth the Sabbath from polluting it, and taketh hold of my covenant, even them will I bring to my holy mountain, and make them joyful in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and their sacrifices shall be accepted upon mine altar. For mine house shall be called an house of prayer for all people. The Lord God, which gathereth the outcasts of Israel, saith, Yet will I gather others to him, beside those that are gathered unto him. What God is saying here is that he's specifically talking to the Jewish people who are going to go into captivity, exiled out of the land of Judah. And he gives them tells them about keeping the Sabbath. Now, when we look at this today, we know that the Sabbath is not the way the Jews have kept it. The Sabbath is one day out of 7. We've talked about that. We give it to the Lord. But what he's telling the people here says, listen, number one, you can't go to the temple and worship because the temple has been destroyed. And I told you how to worship at the temple, but you can't do that. So what you're going to have to do is remember the Sabbath day. That shows your dedication to God. That shows that you are still having your heart toward God and doing his will. So he points all these things out. And in verse number 1, he's saying, listen, you need to be obedient. Be obedient to me and do as I say. Now in verse number 7 and verse number 8, just verse number 7, he says, even them will I bring to my holy mountain and make them joyful in my house of prayer. It's a house of prayer. God's house, the temple, is to be called the house of prayer. It is the place where people could look to, people could go to at the time when they were in Judah, and they called it, he said it will be called a house of prayer. Go over to the New Testament and you see what Jesus says in Mark chapter 11. Mark chapter 11, and look at verse number 17. Now it says in verse 17, it starts out, and he taught what he was done. He just finished cleansing the temple, casting out the money changers, overturning the tables. And it says, and he taught, saying unto them, Is it not written, My house shall be called of all nations the house of prayer, but ye have made it a den of thieves? He says, all nations. The word nations is a word that's many times translated as Gentiles. It's translated as heathen. He says everybody. When he uses, we see the word nations in the scripture, it's not talking about things like England and Canada and Mexico and the United States. It's talking about all people. It's the word ethnos, where we get the word ethnic or ethnicity. And it's talking about different cultures of all people all over the world. His house, the temple, will be called of all nations the house of prayer. Now, even at the time of Christ, there was a temple, but that temple was destroyed also later on, AD 70. So there's no temple in Jerusalem today. Well, how are all people going to call the temple of God the house of prayer if it's not there? Well, it's going to be rebuilt. And then Christ will return, set up his kingdom, and all nations. And that's the point we want to look at as we look at this passage in Isaiah 56. God makes it clear, not just to the Jewish people, but he makes it clear to us that he accepts all people, not just the Jewish people. He makes, in the Old Testament, he calls the Jewish people his chosen people. But as we see more of what he says, and the Jewish people never saw it, and just apparently didn't see it, he points it out here, that God accepts all people. The Bible tells us that God is not a respecter of persons. We are all equal with one another in God's eyes. He made some rules for the Jewish people and the judgment or the worship in the temple, and he tells them in a way here, saying, listen, I had these rules for the priests, and I had the rules for the Levites. I had rules for the Amorites and the Perizzites and all of those people back there. But I want you to know that that was specifically for you and your worship at that time. But I am telling you now, all people can come to me, not just a certain few. Verse number 3 of Isaiah 56, verse number 3, he says, "Neither let the son of the stranger that hath joined himself to the Lord speak, saying," now, I'm going to stop there for a second. The son of a stranger, somebody who is not an Israelite, okay, outside of the people who are not descendants of Abraham or even descendants of Jacob. And he says, don't let them say this. It says, first of all, he says, they have joined himself to the Lord. A person who has come to Christ, a person who has come to acknowledge God and God's provision for sin. When they recognize what God at this time was going to do, he's going to take care of my sin. I can't do it myself. I trust in God to provide for my salvation. He's joined himself to the Lord. He says, don't let him say this. And this is what he's not supposed to say now, right there. That it doesn't have quotation marks, but it starts with a capital T and the. The Lord hath utterly separated me from his people. Okay? He's saying if you have come to God by faith, today we would say by faith in Jesus Christ, don't ever consider yourself a second-class person in the family of God. You are as good and as righteous as everybody else. Now, maybe we have different sins, but the righteousness of Christ that has been applied to you has been applied to the person across the church from you. You and I are equal in God's righteousness. So he says, don't let these people say that. And we'll look at why they would say that a little bit later. But then he goes on and he says this, neither let the eunuch say, behold, I am a dry tree. Now what a eunuch was, as we know that the Bible talks a lot, many times, about barren women who could not have children. Sarah didn't have children for a long, long time. We know that Ruth was it Ruth? No. Jacob's wife, Leah and Rachel. She couldn't have kids for a long time, so she was considered barren. And then even in the New Testament, Elizabeth, Isabel, Elizabeth couldn't have children too, either. But they were barren. Well, a eunuch is a man who couldn't have children, and so he says, "Don't. If you're a eunuch, a man that is I'll say barren because it's more understood. Don't say I'm a dry tree, because I'm going to bless you. I'm going to bring to your life things that are better than sons and daughters." Look at what he says in verse 5. He says, even unto them, well, let's go back to verse 4. He's still talking to the eunuchs. For thus saith the Lord unto the eunuchs that keep my Sabbaths, those people who are truly worshiping God properly, and choose the things that please me and take hold of my covenant. Even unto them will I give in mine house and within my walls a place. That means we're going to be in his house, right? And he says, and a name better than of sons and daughters. I will give them an everlasting name that shall not be cut off. Nobody should ever feel second class. When it comes to God and his goodness, it's offered to all people. It's not offered just to certain people, just to people who do certain things or the right things or automatically good in their lives and they do good things. No, it's those people who come to God through Jesus Christ. He promises blessing. Now, both of these classes of people, the barren people, the eunuchs, and also the strangers, God had made, I'll say provision, but he made restrictions for them in the law about how to worship and what they were allowed to do. Go back to the book of Leviticus. Leviticus 21. Leviticus 21, and look at verse number 21. He says, God in His law, He's talking to talking to Aaron and his seed, his children, who were the priests. He says, no man that hath a blemish of the seed of Aaron the priest shall come nigh or near to offer the offerings of the Lord made by fire. He hath a blemish. He shall not come nigh to offer the bread of his God. He shall eat the bread of his God, both of the most holy and of the holy. Only he shall not go in unto the veil, nor come nigh unto the altar, because he hath a blemish, that he profane not my sanctuaries, for I the Lord do sanctify them. And Moses told it unto Aaron and to his sons and unto all the children of Israel. So they're saying, listen, if you have a priest, these descendants of Aaron, if they have anything wrong, they could have a crippled hand. They couldn't go in and offer the sacrifices. They could eat of the bread and take of the sacrifices, but they couldn't do the offering. And so that person, those people who were restricted, may say, I'm not worthy. God is telling them in Isaiah, you are as worthy as everybody else. It's not about how you look. It's not about how you are able to do anything. It's about your faith. And we talked about that this morning. Go over to Deuteronomy. So this is about the priests themselves. Go to Deuteronomy chapter 23. Deuteronomy 23, look at verse number 1. He says, he that is wounded in the stones, or hath his privy member cut off, shall not enter into the congregation of the Lord. A bastard shall not enter into the congregation of the Lord. Even to his 10th generation shall he not enter into the congregation of the Lord. So a person who is illegitimately born, he couldn't. Now the congregation of the Lord, there's differences of opinion of what this is, but I see it as worship. I see it as taking part in the actual service, not or maybe it's the leadership position. They could not have a leadership position. They could be a regular person in the assembly of Israel, and they could partake to a certain extent. But he says you're not going to be part of that ruling class because you have a blemish. These are rules that he's taking away when we see Isaiah 56. So he goes on in verse number 3. I mentioned, I think, Amorites or Ammonites. He says, an Ammonite or Moabite shall not enter into the congregation of the Lord, even to their 10th generation. Shall they not enter into the congregation of the Lord forever? 10 generations. The man who is an Ammonite, he can be married to a Jewish lady, and their kids are half Jewish and half Ammonite, but that child could not be part of that congregation. Then that child can have children all the way 10 times. God says you've got to wait 10 generations before your children can partake. It's in a sense cleansing out the evil, but he's going beyond that as the children of Israel are taken out of the Judah and brought into captivity. He's saying, I want you to understand, yes, I had some rules back there, but I never called those people second class. I never called them anything but children. They could not do certain things, but they were still my children. And in Isaiah 56, he tells them, now you can, and I'm going to do these things for you because I love you. The blessings, we have salvation, we have blessings, we have rewards from God, and everything that God promises us is much better than what these people are missing out on. The stranger, missed out on the worship of the Lord. Even though he joined himself to the Lord, he became part of the Jewish nation. They had a process that they were to go through, even to be circumcised, that they could become a Jew. You look at the book of Esther, and because the people of the land were afraid of the Jewish people, they became Jews. They had to change their way of worship and say, I'm going to worship the way the Jews do, and I'm going to worship the one God of the Jewish people, Jehovah. And so he says, they who have joined themselves to the Lord, don't be cutting yourself down. Don't speak evil even of yourself. God is going to bless. Now go down to verse number 6 as he continues on in verse number 6. He says, the sons of the stranger that join themselves to the Lord to serve him. That's us. We are the sons of the stranger. We don't become Jewish people. But the Bible does teach that by faith we are children of Abraham. And here he points the truth out, what God is showing to them. He says that join themselves to the Lord to serve him, and to love the name of the Lord, to be his servants, everyone that keepeth the Sabbath from polluting it. Again, worshiping God without the temple, that building that God had in Jerusalem. On Mount Zion, we sang the song, we're marching to Zion, and that's what it's talking about. And he goes on, and taketh hold of my covenant, even them will I bring to my holy mountain, and make them joyful in my house of prayer. We don't have that temple today, so where is the house of prayer? If he's going to make us joyful in the house of prayer, where can we go? Well, it's right here. Not this building. It's right here. We are the temple of the Holy Spirit. When we put our faith in Jesus Christ, we become God's house of prayer. And if we are God's house, then we are to be clean. And we talk about that at other times, not today. He says, make them joyful in my house of prayer. Their burnt offerings and their sacrifices shall be accepted. For mine house shall be called an house of prayer for all people. So God's house is not limited just to that temple in Jerusalem. His house of prayer is not limited to just the Jewish people. God's house of prayer is not limited by anything except what we make of it. How we treat his house of prayer, his temple, his tool, our bodies. We are God's house of prayer. We offer sacrifices, but the Bible teaches, and we'll look at that in a minute, spiritual sacrifices. And in John chapter 10, verse 16, Jesus says, other sheep I have which are not of this fold. Now, some religions take that to mean something other than what Christ is telling us here. I'm not going to go into that. He's saying here, I have more people. I have other people that are not part of the Jewish nation. And those others he speaks about in verse number 8 back in Isaiah 56. Look at verse number 8. The Lord God, which gathereth the outcasts of Israel, saith. So he's gathered the outcasts, those people, those strangers who have joined themselves to the Lord. He's gathered those people who say that they're a dry tree. They don't have any children, and they're not able to go into and worship God as others. God says, I'm accepting them. I'm accepting the outcasts of Israel. But he goes on, he says, yet will I gather others to him, beside those that are gathered unto him. Others, that's you and me. I'm bringing others, just like I'm not separating the people with blemishes from worship. I'm bringing them into the fold. I'm also bringing these Gentile people that you don't care about, and I'm bringing them in. In the book of Ephesians, the Bible tells us that God has made two groups of people into one. out of twain, he says, he makes one people. That we no longer have a barrier between us. Jesus made the point of this house of, this temple being a house of prayer when he cleansed the temple. Look over at John chapter 2. This is the first time that Jesus cleansed the temple. And he made a point that the Jews didn't understand how they were to treat that temple. God pointed it out. God told them in the Old Testament. And when it comes to the New Testament, they were making it a house of merchandise. Look at verse number 13. John 2:13. And the Jews' Passover was at hand. Jesus went up to Jerusalem and found in the temple those that sold oxen and sheep and doves, and the changers of money sitting. And when he had made a scourge of small cords, he drove them all out of the temple, and the sheep and the oxen, and poured out the changers' money, and overthrew the tables. Now, you see, he's putting his his teaching into action. And so he drives out the oxen and the sheep and sends them out of the temple. What are they doing in the temple? They're going to be slaughtered, but they're having people buy them. The temple wasn't the place to buy it. The temple was the place to worship. But he sent the oxen and the donkey. Well, he didn't have donkeys there. The sheep. He drove them all out of the temple, and the sheep and the oxen, and poured out the changers' money. So you see what he's doing. The large animals he sends out. He's upset that they're selling these things, making the temple a place of merchandise. He calls it a den of thieves, we read. And he overthrows the tables. The money gets scattered. But look what he says in here, right at the next verse. And said unto them that sold doves. Now, how would they be holding the doves in the temple? Probably in cages. And what happens if you take that cage and throw it against the wall and it breaks? Well, the dove gets out and flies away. Jesus didn't take away these people's valuables. He didn't take anything away from them. He was making a point. This is not to be used. This temple is not to be used like this. He says to the men that sold doves, take these things hence. Make not my Father's house a house of merchandise. Take these things out of here. Pick up your cages and get outside. This is not to be used like that. Giving us an example of our own temple of the Holy Spirit, us. We should get rid of things. But Jesus is being still loving and tender. You might look at it and he made a scourge and starts whipping the animals. He didn't whip the people. Now, the Bible doesn't say it, but he sent the animals out. He didn't send the people out. Now the animals could go out and the people could go find them and get them. But if he had broken the cages of the doves would fly away, and they'd take them a long time to ever find them if they could. So Christ, in his tenderness, cleansed the temple. He doesn't want people to feel bad about themselves. And that's why in Isaiah 56, he's saying, don't let the eunuch say, I'm a dry tree. I'm going to give you a lot more than sons and daughters. Don't let the stranger say, I don't have any part in the Lord. I'm not part of the Lord's family. Don't think poorly of yourself. Now, I know just heard Joel Osteen, everything he says, treat yourself right, don't look at yourself bad. In a sense, there's a little bit of truth to that, but you've got to look at yourself and say, listen, if I got sin in my life, I've got to do something. I am wrong. I need to confess that sin and get right with the Lord. But don't beat yourself over the head about your life, thinking you are less than other people, thinking you're worse than other people, because God looks at us all alike. Now, don't pick yourself up higher than anybody. Because, again, God looks at you as his child, as he looks at other people. So God's love for all men shows through the way he treats people. Today, as I said, the temple of God is our bodies. We have become God's temple, and we are to keep that temple, that tabernacle, clean. Go over to 1 Corinthians chapter 3. First Corinthians 3, look at verse number 9. He says, "For we are laborers together with God. Ye are God's husbandry. Ye are God's building." We are God's building. We are God's temple. And we worship according to God with ourselves, with our bodies toward God. Go over to Hebrews chapter 13. We don't sacrifice animals. We sacrifice ourselves. Paul says, make yourselves a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable unto God. Hebrews chapter 13, look at verse number 15. It says, by him, and he's talking about by Jesus, by Christ, by him, therefore, let us offer the sacrifice of praise. You know, sacrifices of praise, well, let me finish there. To God continually, that is the fruit of our lips, giving thanks to his name. So the sacrifice of praise is giving thanks to God for what God has done for us. Nobody can be saved by just, quote unquote, sacrifice of praise and thanking God, unless they're doing it through Jesus Christ. And that's what he says. By him, therefore, let us offer the sacrifice of praise. Not by anything else, not by ourselves. We need Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ comes in and makes himself within us, and we become the house of prayer. The house of, what does it mean when we thank God for his blessings? Isn't that prayer? We pray. We are the house of prayer. Go over to 1 Peter chapter 2. 1 Peter chapter 2, and look at verse number 5. Ye also, as lively stones or living stones, are built up a spiritual house and holy priesthood, to offer up spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God by Jesus Christ. You can't leave Jesus Christ out. I've talked to people, and I say, how can you get to heaven? Well, you got to confess your sins. No. You need Jesus Christ. You can't just confess. Confession of sin is just saying, this is what I've done. I confess it to God, but that's not enough. If you still reject Jesus Christ, you're still unsaved. So he says, by Jesus Christ, not by any other thing. We come to God. We are the house of prayer. What did Jesus call the temple when the money changers were in there and the people are selling the animals? He said it was a house of merchandise. We are not to be a house of merchandise. We are to be a house of prayer. We aren't to be focused on worldly treasures. Our focus should be on God and offering him the sacrifice of praise. So we need to examine ourselves. Am I today a house of prayer? Or am I today a house of merchandise? The other term, what Jesus said, house of merchandise doesn't sound as bad as a den of thieves. So are we pulling away from God? Is my body a den of thieves where I want what I want and it doesn't matter what God wants? My house, instead of a house of prayer, a house of merchandise. I'm thinking more of this world and things I can put my hands on, rather than looking toward God and praising Him for what He has done. You know, those eunuchs weren't going to have sons and daughters at all. But God said, what I give you is much better than many sons and daughters. And so our blessings from God are going to be so much greater than what we see or what we think we want. We need to let God bring those blessings. You might not even recognize it. Some of the blessings we have are so much better than merchandise or things. But our bodies, our lives are to be houses of prayer and not houses of merchandise or dens of thieves. We are God's house of prayer. Let's pray. Father, we thank you for the example of the Old Testament and how you love all people, not just Jewish people, not just certain classes of people, but Lord, those people who are made in your image, even those people who are born crippled, people with missing members. Lord, whatever the condition of a person's body is, they, because of your Spirit and your breath that was breathed into Adam, they are made in the image of God. And we know that no matter who we are, where we're from, what color we are, how rich we are, what class of people, you love us as much as you love the people everywhere. And we thank you that you have given us the Holy Spirit so that our bodies, our lives can be the house of prayer, offering spiritual sacrifices to you that you will accept because we are born again. Thank you, Lord, for being here with us tonight. Guide us now as we take part in our communion service, the Lord's Supper, that we remember the death of Jesus Christ. I pray in Jesus' name, amen.